Hello, everybody. Welcome to this first session of the GAI Members Day. And wherever you are in the world, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Delighted that you could join us today. Our first session of the day is going to be looking at a fascinating issue around what is the future for architectural ironmongery. That means what is the future for us as individuals, for businesses, and indeed for the Guild itself. So I hope you'll have lots of questions for our panel. And I'm very kindly want to give thanks for Masonite's very kind sponsorship of this session. Thank you for that. So we're going to be taking a nice long view of the architectural ironmongery sector, looking at things like the big economic, environmental, social, maybe even political, international, technical issues that are going to shape our lives for, well, let's say the next 10 years or so. That's the timeline that we've set on this. So my name is Liz Mail. I run a PR and marketing consultancy, Liz Mail Consulting. And we've been lucky to work with the Guild for many years now. And I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by a brilliant panel today, a very illustrious group of experts. So with us, we have Hannah Mansell. Hannah, welcome. She is the Masonite UK's Group Technical Director and also looks after the brands such as Premdoor Crosby, Solidor, Doorstop International, National Hickman. Welcome, Hannah, to the panel. We also have Paul Martin. Hello, Paul, Managing Director in the UK for D-Line. Great to have you here.
See you, Liz.
Richard Waterhouse, give us a wave. Hi, Richard. Richard is an architect and a consultant. He was formerly the Chief Exec and also the Chief Strategy Officer for NBS. So it's very good to have maybe an architectural focus on this as well. So thank you for joining us.
Hello.
And Steve Buick. Hello, Steve. Steve is the Chief Operating Officer for Access Solutions EMEA at dormakaba, and I think probably well known to many of us here today. So a fantastic panel. Great to have you here. In a moment, I'm going to ask you each, if you wouldn't mind, to sort of spell out your vision, your views on the future for architectural ironmongery. But we'll let each panelist have their turn, and then we'll open it up into a Q&A session. But before we do that, for those of you who are joining us as participants and delegates today, I want to explain to you the best way to get your questions answered. So on your screen, on the right-hand side of your screen, you should see some tabs which says chat, polls, attendees, and Q&As. And it's in that Q&A section, please, that we would like you to put your questions for our panelists. And I will do my very best to get through as many of those at the end of the session once we've heard from each one in turn. So I hope that's really clear. Any problems, I'm sure there'll be somebody on standby to support you, but put your questions in the Q&A area, please, and then I can see them and we can do our best to moderate. Good, excellent. So no further ado, I think we'll turn straight away and we'll start, please, with Hannah Mansell.
Hi, Liz. Liz, thank you very much for the introduction, and I'm so pleased to be joined, particularly by my learned colleagues on the panel today. So some of you out in the audience may know that I am completely obsessed with fire doors, so it will be of no surprise to you today that some of the main drivers for the points I want to make in this debate are going to be around fire doors. But essentially, I think that we can reflect these points right back to the entire product portfolio in our industry. So really, the first point I wanted to make was how we should stop calling these products fire doors, and we should think of them as door sets that have got fire characteristics. And of course, they have got multiple other performance characteristics that they're going to need to achieve. So really, one of the main themes of the discussion today, I'd like to turn it back round to considering our products as working within systems. So not just the system of all of the components, of course, including all of those critical parts of ironmongery, but actually really thinking about these products, how they work within the system of building safety as well. So really setting out my vision for the next 10 years, I'm talking about providing a safe and secure built environment for all of our stakeholders. So let me just kind of go into some of those themes in a little bit more detail. I've talked about this system approach, but I'm really talking about a holistic approach to how we think about our products, whether we're thinking about the design characteristics, the components, or simply how we actually even approach these designs. I'd like to then step back. Let's go one closer, even into the world of ironmongery. Let's look at some of the evidence that the expert witnesses at Grenfell Tower Inquiry have brought or proposed so far. And really, is it that one single piece of ironmongery, something which is seemingly quite significant maybe within the system of control in the building, could actually be responsible for dismantling the entire fire safety strategy of that building? So I'd also like to pick up some other themes today in our debate, which is how do we turn this around and actually make this safer for our stakeholders? I think that really the landscape that we're in at the moment, and actually what we will see over the next 10 years, is probably one of the most exciting yet chaotic landscapes that we have seen in the door and the ironmongery world. And I think that we are going to be absolutely bombarded with new legislation, new rules, new guidance that our members are going to very quickly need to adopt in order to really keep going and keep moving forward within the industry. Because if I'm to be really frank, the ironmongery industry, or pockets of it at least, is a place where I, at my coalface, my corner of the industry, see that our stakeholders are at risk. And the reason why I say that is that there are some parts of the industry where specification is being eroded, it's being diluted, and sometimes fundamentally broken. So really, how as an industry do we turn this around? How do we build trust with our stakeholders again? And how does the Guild prepare its members for this brave new world? So Liz, I think that's it from me. I don't know whether I've gone over my 4 minutes, but I'll go back on mute now.
Well, that's got us off to an explosive start. Thank you, Hannah. A good challenge there for all of us to think about for the future. Thank you very much. Let me turn next then to Paul, please.
Hi, Liz. Thanks, and excellent opening, Hannah. Really a lot of information there for us all to sort of take on board, and for the members. And for me, I'd like to thank the GAI for inviting me here today to spend a moment of my time and obviously your time to talk about the future of architectural ironmongery. The chosen subject that I decided to focus on is all about sustainability, recyclability, life cycle costs of products within our builds today, and also for tomorrow. I mean, we are looking at a 10-year sort of stretch here. So where will we see our products in the next 10 years, and what information are we as members having to sort of push forward to the contractors and the clients that we're working with? From our side, I think that I see that the era of poorly made, replaceable or imitation products is actually coming to an end. I think it's a waste-aware environment that people are looking for stronger products that stand the test of time. These products don't just look like design classics; they have to behave like them too. And delivering timeless design constructed to superb quality standards. These are products with strong roots and proven integrity in their craftsmanship as we move forward. I'm incredibly proud of what I put forward into our market, and I continue to develop this even further as we move onwards. We have to place enormous value on our product's reputation for standing the test of time, because believing that anything that's less than superb in its design and craftsmanship is simply just a waste, not just of money, but also of resources. Too long people have been thinking about buying things that can easily be thrown away or replaced. And I think as conscious consumption becomes necessary, sustainability is an essential consideration in the way we live and the things that we actually buy today. Long before sustainability became an issue, certain manufacturers offered and maximised their guarantees. That promise was based on an ethos of designing every tiny detail to work seamlessly towards a perfect whole. I think that this commitment must extend to reasonable sourcing of steel, to low emission hand assembly, and to a lean factory that never produces over what's actually required. Sourcing, processing, and recycling, these are going to be sort of key words that I'll be sort of talking about today. What is the recyclable content? How much of that within steel that is bought? How much of that waste is sent back to be recycled and then used again, only to buy back what we actually need? I mean, just to sort of conclude here, I think during the last 20 years as an industry, I've noticed that we have sourced further afield from local supply chains and become almost subservient to export markets. Cheaper products have been bought, yeah, and the industry has ended up talking more about price than actually about product. We need to make these changes, however big or small, in our network and make the difference for the future generations to benefit from this. Reclaim our production lines, create jobs, possibilities, but also don't lose the sight of the skills that we've all gained over the last however many years that we've been working in the industry. When we study to become architectural ironmongers under the guidance of the GEI, we are investing in people to be part of that woven fabric that we intertwine with every day. If we are only here to sell on price, we will never shape that large carbon footprint that we are currently generating. And that's where I'm starting from. So thanks very much, Liz.
That's really good. Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much indeed. Very thought-provoking. Can I ask Richard to go next, please?
Absolutely, and hello everybody. As Liz said, I'm Richard Waterhouse. I trained as an architect, although I've not practiced for a long time. I got into the world of data, and in particular joining NBS, involved in the process of decision making around products. NBS, as you'll be aware, is a massive data provider. So specification data structures for every system, every product in the market. Confused when we started talking about this session because people started talking about AI. I thought, what's AI? Artificial intelligence here? And this is where AI in your world meets AI from my world, because I'm going to talk about data. I'm going to talk about the future of your industry, of our industry, and what that means in terms of data. Hannah's already talked about regulation and the changes in regulation. And one thing we saw from the Queen's speech a couple of weeks ago is the Building Safety Bill. The Building Safety Bill will be enacted during the next stage of Parliament. So if we're thinking 10 years hence, we can see this being one of the fundamental pieces of legislation that the whole industry will have to react to. And inside that bill is a thing called the golden thread of information. That is the key information that affects the safety to ensure people who live in buildings, ultimately extend to all buildings, they can feel safe in those buildings. But Hannah was quite right. Ironmongery is part of the system. So when we rebuilt NBS a few years ago, we built it as a systems-based tool. A door set is a system, and the ironmongery is fundamental. A chain always fails at its weakest, so every part of that chain, every part of that system be spec'd to be able to deliver the performance requirements of the whole system. And then we've got to think about that system in use. As one element of it is the system as delivered and installed and perhaps tested in place. But then what about its ongoing operation and its maintenance? And this is where data is going to start getting really interesting for you, because we're testing over its lifespan. We're actually going to collect data on the usage of products. And what that means is we'll find out which products work and which products don't. The facilities management team are going to become the most important players in your world, because they'll be able to say whether your door closers, your hinges, your locks, your actuators, whether they're working or not. And it's going to come back to 3 C's. The first is compliance. Does the product actually do what it's supposed to do? Then, of course, there's cost. Is this the cheapest yet? But it has to still do, of course, carbon. Because just as important as cost is going to become the carbon budget, because we've all got these incredible carbon targets that we have to achieve. Once we've got that bedrock in place, that means we can then build all sorts of other new industries on top of the data. Remember that once the car was invented and we'd gone from horses to cars, all of a sudden the travel industry really got going. Once we got into applying data to the travel industry, we got things like TripAdvisor coming. So all these sorts of new industries will emerge from data in the industry, and you can be part of those new industries. An example for me would be, I'm an architect. I love the feel of a door handle. I want to know that that door handle feels the right way. Well, could you send me a 3D model so I can 3D print the handle and see it there and then, rather than have to wait for a sample to be sent through? Who knows? Just remember, you're in charge because you're going to be the providers of that data.
Gosh, that is very interesting and provocative as well. A very different view on the industry for the future. Well, I think we'll get some good questions on that. Well, I hope I will. Please, a reminder to everybody, get your questions in on the right-hand side of your screen, please. Type them into the panel there. And we will turn then for some final words from Steve, please.
Thank you, Liz. I mean, one of the challenges of going forth is you run the risk of the previous speakers covering a lot of your presentation, but we'll see if I can be any different. So for me, there are three drivers for us. One is sustainability, one is digitalization, and the third one is data. And more specifically for me, sustainability is something that, from a manufacturing perspective, defined efficiency will become much more critical than it has been in the past, and specifically their energy efficiency or energy harvesting. So there will be a drift towards making sure that what we prescribe is much more energy efficient or generative than it has been in the past. And this will apply to the whole supply chain, not just in isolation to the product element of it. And I think we need to remember that the decision makers of the future will be very much more aware of this aspect than perhaps we were 10 years ago. So the value in organizations and the value attached to sustainability is increasing dramatically in organizations, and the visibility and also how the outside world views the performance of an organization that has sustainability at the top of its charter. From digitalization, I mean both products and services. So architectural ironmongers will need to embrace this to make sure that their skills and training remain relevant and prominent. And what I mean by that is there will be digital tools that enter into our world. You still need to be able to interpret. You still need to be able to apply all of the training that you guys have done as architectural ironmongers. But we need to recognise there will be a digital element to that, and that includes things like artificial intelligence. It includes things like virtual reality. You know, the 3D printing is one example, but there are many examples of where that's starting to drift into our industry. Building lifecycle management, as was mentioned earlier, will be critical, and I'll talk a little bit about that in data in a second. But I think the thing to remember here is the barriers to entry in the digital world are much lower. And as those people come into our world, they don't attack our whole, everything that we do. They don't attack every aspect of our operation. They attack the golden nuggets. They attack the bits that generate the revenue or generate the profit for us, or where the real stickiness of our skill set sits. And the final thing on digitalization is we can't get away from the connectivity, the Internet of Things. You know, more and more products now are interdependent on the performance of products adjacent to them, and they provide a much different solution, a much richer solution than perhaps products and services had in the past. And IoT security, so cyber security, is something that's the forefront of most chief information security officers in organizations. You know, so anything that's linked to the internet needs to be fully protected in simple terms. And when I say data, I mean specifically the value that data provides, but also the monetarization of that data. When I say value, it's also what does that mean in pounds or euros or dollars, and the value of what's installed in the building will be enhanced by the data it generates. You know, examples of that we've mentioned there: predictive maintenance, failure reporting, warranty reporting, but it gives you throughput and flow. So it gives you capacity information, it gives you time when areas are busy, when areas are quiet, and you can manage energy consumption, you know, through that data. And it also gives you the ability to do budget planning. So if you know the life cycle expectancy of products, it helps businesses with their financial planning. And services will become a much broader topic in that area. And life cycle cost, as was mentioned earlier, will become important. And the key performance indicators that people can measure us by will be very different. So they can measure our reliability, they can take performance metrics, and they can double check that what we say will happen in a solution does happen in a solution. So for me, sustainability, digitalization, and data are three things that will be more prominent than they are now in 10 years' time.
Thank you very much, Steve. And thank you to you all for some really, really thought-provoking presentations, put very articulately, so thank you. And we're going to open up to questions from the floor in a moment. Just another reminder again to get your questions into that Q&A panel. If I may, though, I'm going to ask for sort of chair's prerogative if I could just ask a question of my own, and I'd like each person to reply in turn, please, and we'll do the same order. So it's the same question to each, but start off with Hannah. I want you to imagine that you have a, I don't know, 16, 17, 18-year-old in your family. Do you encourage them to go into the architectural ironmongery profession? And if so, what advice are you giving them about how they, you know, ensure a long-term, successful, very successful long-term career in this sector? What advice would you be giving them?
Liz, this is a really brilliant, it's a brilliant question, because actually in the last few months I've been so lucky to be able to build my technical team. So although I've got a really massive spread of skills, I actually have got some individuals in there who are really literally just entering our industry. And what excites me so much about these individuals is that they're right at the beginning of their journey, the journey I can kind of remember from 20 years ago. But I can see that they're getting inspired by, you know, to the general public, when you start talking about doors, hinges, pieces of ironmongery, they're thinking like, what are you going on about? But for us, we actually understand how integral these components can be, not just to getting your way around the building, but actually how they can kind of be the make or break of product performance, but even how stakeholders kind of interact with them. So the things that I would really be trying to inspire that generation with, to show them why this industry is such a fantastic industry to go at. So number one, I think this industry has never been more of an exciting time. So that's number one. Number two, we've got a really great traditional and basic historic foundation about what we do. Yeah, we're not just going out there and saying, oh, here's a lock. We have disciplines, we have regimes set up so that we can go and prove this performance. So I would then encourage them to really always have a questioning mind, because I think that probably everybody on this panel would agree with me, that's what keeps us inspired. But ultimately, like in this industry, we really do have the power to impact in a positive fashion the lives of the users who use and interact with our products. So to be honest with you, I would say this is a fantastic industry to be in. It's a niche area, so it's special, because when you're niche, you are very, very special. And actually, we shouldn't overlook this. We shouldn't overlook the role that a door handle, a closer, a hinge. Really, when we take those apart, those components apart, really think about it. A poorly fitted door closer could be the yes or no of someone being able to freely go in and out of their building. Like, think about the value, the purpose that actually our industry delivers to those individuals. And I think that's what I'm going to draw it back to, is having a clear purpose, one which is really set up on kind of the fact that we're all here because we want to build these safer, more secure environments for our stakeholders. Sorry, Liz, that was a bit of a long answer to that question.
Well, I think you're spot on. I mean, I do have teenagers that old, and I know that they're inspired by purpose-driven organisations and brands. So you've articulated that very well. Thank you. Paul, what would you add to that?
Okay, well, I fell into the ironmongery industry because of my father. So I was a 20-year-old guy coming into the trade, and my dad had been working for Allgood. So I've been in the industry now for nearly 30 years. What would I say to my 18-year-old daughter or son? Well, my daughter at the moment, my eldest, is 13. Yeah, I would absolutely push her towards going into this industry. It's been fantastic for me. I love the community that we work in and out of. I mean, we are in competition with one another every day, but it's a great, great industry. And, you know, the industry is always evolving. We haven't stood still. And I think talking today about the future of architectural ironmongery would mean if I was talking to my, say, daughter of 18, I'll say, you're of that next generation where you are a go-getter, you want everything instant. They are thinking about more sustainable ways of living. And I think that that generation could actually bring something fantastic into our trade. I think, you know, we've all sort of, if we look back on where we've been these last 12 months as an industry, we've actually propelled ourselves, I think, probably 6 years ahead of where we would have been 12 months ago. I think the way we're working now, it's actually, let's take the positives out of this today. You know, we're all sat round today on a computer, we're talking to one another, we're sharing, we haven't got in our cars, we haven't driven to a big space. And as much as I'd like to share a glass of wine with you all and talk to people, we've actually cut down on all that sort of, that wasted fuel, that cost, that time to actually be here today. So this is such a great sustainable way of working. And I think that we will improve, that new generation coming through will as well. And what Hannah said, when I go into buildings, I think for me, the achievement that I can see at the very end of it, the end game, looking at those products fitted in an environment that is secure for the stakeholders at the very end, it's an amazing feeling. And I do go on these kind of busman's journeys when I pop into buildings, and I sort of point at discrepancies of leaking door closers or hinges that are dropping and what have you, but that's because I care, and that's because I think when you're in the industry you do care. So actually pushing that through is really important. And yeah, going back to your question, of course I'd love my daughter to follow me in the trade. Whether or not she will or not, that's another question.
Well, we look forward to having her on this panel in 10 years' time. Hannah, did you want to say something?
Just to make a really kind of quick comment to follow up on that. Like, I think this is what it's all about. Like, I think none of us on the call or probably in the audience, we all understand that we are working in an environment, a landscape, which actually is fraught with risk when we're particularly talking about the safety and security of others. And actually, like, to your comment, like, I know that what I do during the day, it means I can go home at night and actually put my head on the pillow and sleep soundly, because I know that behind my products are a lot of people who are sleeping safely that night. And actually, as long as I can continue to do that every day in my job, I know that I'm making meaningful change within this role. So again, sort of, you know, constantly searching for continuous improvement is so important for our industry. And I really, I've got nothing to argue with for our other panelists, because I think that, you know, we see this as the holistic picture.
I think that's what I was saying at the very beginning there, Liz. Sorry to interrupt, but I did say at the very beginning, it is all about upselling product. It is all about talking about what that product's worth is, not about that product's price. And exactly what Hannah said there, she wants to go home, she wants to sleep at night, she wants to, you know, rest well, because she knows she's put the best possible solution on these buildings. And that is what our members, and that's what we're here to talk about today.
Okay. Richard, right. Absolute nuts and bolts here, right? What are you going to tell that young person that they need to get trained up? What are the skills that they're going to need for the roles of the future?
So I've got two boys. One's 21, one is 19. Both just gone to university. And for both of them, we deliberately, my wife and I deliberately said we would not push them into any profession. So I wouldn't push them into the AI world. That has to be their choice. The guidance we've always given them is do something that you enjoy. Do something for which you have a passion. Because if you can do that, you'll enjoy your job, you will enjoy your life. And
but if
what
you
have
were
to do,
going to, sorry, Richard, to interrupt, I'm going to push you a bit hard though. If you were going to encourage someone into this sector, what do they need? What skills do they need, do you believe, for the next, you know, for a long-term successful career?
Long-term successful career, as everybody used to say to me, you've got two of these and one of these. Use these more than you use this, particularly at the start of your career. Listen and learn. Look at what success looks like. Find out what success looks like. Think about where you want to be, what you believe to be true, your guiding light within you, and find organizations that have something similar. And then think about where you want to position yourself. What is it that you enjoy doing? Because once again, if you are an out and out salesperson, if you really enjoy getting into the detail of that conversation, then go and be part of sales. If you like the numbers, go into finance. But you have to find the skills that you have. One of my favorite analogies is the rugby team. And well, that's the traditional rugby team before we got to all these super athletes where even the scrum half's 6'8". But in a rugby team, there's a place for every shape and size. You just have to work out which bit of the team you fit into. But there's always a place for everybody.
Okay. I totally agree with that point of view. I'm slightly surprised. I thought you would tell your teenager to go off and become a data scientist.
Well, once again, and if you look at where is the future of our world, I think what we've seen from the last year is that data and computing will fill every sector and every part of the sector. So to have core computing skills and computer literacy, I think, is a bare minimum. Beyond that, the ability to do programming and understand programming will be more than advantageous because it's transferable skills.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Steve, what would you add?
I'll try and be succinct. I think for me, the first question I'd ask my kids, mine are 30 and 20, or 31 and 21. So, and I wouldn't actually advocate either of them coming into our industry, but that's for completely different reasons. But if they were interested, okay, what I would say to them is they really need to understand what their purpose is in life. What do they value? What do they hold true to their own belief system? And if that is things like sustainability, if it is about safety, if it is about making the world a safer place and a more secure place, then I think they should consider coming into the industry. And I think we shouldn't focus on the history. The history is really, really important. But if you're bringing younger people into the organization, we need to fuse their ambitions, and their ambitions are more based around digitalization. They're more based around instantaneous fulfillment. They're more based around a different value set than maybe certainly I had when I was coming into the industry. So I would say if it fits your belief system, if it fits the things that you value most in life, then do it, but make sure your skill set adds to the history rather than tries to replicate it.
And can I ask a sort of follow-up actually to you, Steve, which is, I mean, the Guild Education Programme, for example, went online, it has become digitalised. We've seen the enormous uptake in all the technical webinars and technical education that's been offered by the Guild since lockdown, being able to reach, hundreds and thousands of people across the world now. In what other ways should the Guild be addressing those educational and skills needs for the future, for the next 10 years?
I think the first thing to say is, I've always been, in all of my time being associated with the Guild, been super impressed with the education program. I think it's what underpins the Guild. It's its unique selling point, and it is something that it should be entirely proud of. I think we need to be mindful that people, and I can see this in industry now, that we need to be mindful that people learn in different ways. People learn in much shorter sets of information. So, a YouTube video rarely lasts more than 4 minutes. This is a learning patterns from a lot of our younger people. They search information in a different way. They actively research information from different sites that they feel has got a voice. So we need to recognize that to be relevant, we might have to use different partners. We might have to use different tools. We may need to use things like virtual reality to be able to support them. The classroom training may be a thing that is less relevant in the future than it is now. So I think what underpins it is fantastic. And I just think we need to be aware of those digital tools and also those support tools that are out there in the industry to keep us as relevant as new people, younger people enter into our marketplace, because they have different expectations from learning.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Hannah,
So I was just gonna sort of add to that, like maybe the guild should also consider about like who we are targeting with our education resources. So obviously I know that we have got kind of quite a wide target at the moment, but we need to start looking more for external stakeholders who are actually feeding into our business. So we certainly have this responsibility about ensuring competency within our sector. But one thing that I'm feeling from my corner is that actually my external stakeholders, my customers, the next people in the chain, they need training as well. They need to understand our products are as complex as they really are. They need to get under the skin of our products. And in some cases, there is this gap in how do we deliver training to those external stakeholders. So again, I see a bit of a patchy picture across the industry. In some places it's being done better than others, but actually it's upskilling the entire sector. So not just what we're managing within our little bubble, but actually the entire, to really bring up that lowest common denominator, or that best practice level. Because really, look, let's look at it like this: you're as weak as your weakest link, and actually, if one of our links in our massive doorstep stakeholder chain is weak, that's where it's going to fail. Sorry, I think I interrupted.
Well, I'm conscious we've got a couple of good questions I want to get to, but Paul, quickly, just final word on this one.
Yeah, Liz, thanks. I'm a huge supporter of the education system that the GAI actually put out there, and I think it's great to see that they are moving forward rather than standing still with the old way. My father was involved heavily with the old sort of way, and this online platform was amazing. I mean, if we look at sort of virtual reality, as Steve said there, if the viewers could actually walk in a building and actually see how the building operates and how you operate through doors into spaces. I mean, because that is how you actually get a better understanding. Looking at a flat form of a GA, a general arrangement of a building, isn't really going to give the right interpretation, but the actual virtual reality skills that are out there now, and programming, from computer games, etc., it's there for the students to embrace and actually use. And I think they could probably really interact with that so positively. It's something certainly that they should think about doing. But the last thing I was going to say, Liz, is when you get your GAI, and just as the members here, don't let your staff sit in a warehouse with level 3 doing absolutely nothing. They have then got that skill. This is a waste. Do not let them sit there. Put them out. Let them talk to customers, deliver sales skills. As everybody's saying here, they might be into finance, they might be into sales, but don't let them sit there packing boxes. That's a waste of resources. And that's what I'd like to see more of in our industry, is people with the qualifications actually going out there, becoming salespeople, become estimators, but let's see that natural process in our businesses happen.
Yeah, let people find their superpowers. It's a strong philosophy that I have too. Well said, thank you. So I'm going to turn then to some questions. The first is from Timothy Perry, and very good question. I'm going to start with Hannah on this one, because it's about Grenfell. And it was very much in my mind as you were talking about what is going to be the long term, and again, I want us to keep a long term view on this, the long term impact of the Grenfell inquiry. And Timothy asks, how do you think Grenfell will change the specification writing of ironmongery in the UK and internationally, because we are an international audience today, and how will it change the quality of products that are specified? And let's make this quite a quick fire round.
Okay, Liz, feel free to jump in and cut me off when I'm going over time, because you know that I can talk and talk. So I think our industry is probably going to be completely revolutionised by what happened at Grenfell Tower. It was described to me actually on the morning of the fire. This is the 9/11 of the construction industry. So again, let's not overlook kind of the ramifications that are going to actually bounce around and echo around our industry for not just 10 years, but probably decades to come. So we have got all of the new standards and regulations and bits of legislation which are going to come our way. That's surely going to affect us. If we do turn it back round to what does this mean for the specification of ironmongery, I think you've hit upon a really good point there. I think that we are going to see a lot more consideration of ironmongery in these systems of components. So at the moment, we see some manufacturers who are presenting their products onto the market based on isolated testing of just their component. So actually, I think we're going to take real big steps into considering that holistic approach. And the other place, Liz, that I really hope we take some big steps is not thinking that we can compromise any one performance standard or requirement over another. So if I've got security, if I've got fire, if I've got thermal, if I've got durability, I need to make sure that I comply with each one of those things. And I don't just scrape my way over the threshold. I have factors of safety, layers of assurance that I will offer to my clients. So I see radical change coming our way. And to be honest with you, if anybody is sitting there kind of with their head in the sand thinking that we'll go back to cracking on as we always did, I think you're very, very wrong. And it's a risky standpoint to have if anyone is out there thinking that.
Who else would like to answer that one? Richard.
Yeah, I think you're going to find a whole raft coming at you very, very quickly. So we're 3 weeks away from the 4th anniversary of Grenfell. And at the minute, not much has changed. We know that the new building safety bill is coming. All the expectations are is that the next draft will be released before the 4th anniversary. It will look very poor on both the industry and government if that doesn't happen. Within that, there are a number of things that will directly affect product and product safety. So one is the register of construction products, safe construction products. In that register, there are minimum data requirements for the information that must be provided by product manufacturers whose products are deemed to affect the safety of the building. That includes unique references for every product, every piece of literature, etc. There is the recently launched Code for Construction Product Information, and that's how, as manufacturers, you can promote your products, and also getting onto a register of being a manufacturer who is doing it properly. And then, of course, is the data availability to the golden thread, making sure that the information you provide is available not just to the client and the new building safety officer, but also to the designers, to the contractors, so the choices on ironmongery can be recorded through the life cycle of the building. That is another key requirement as part of Grenfell. And I would completely agree with what Hannah said about systems-based testing. You will find that testing and product testing is going to become much more focused, much more radical in terms of retesting and requirements for retesting. And it will not be just about the individual product, it is about whole systems.
Yeah, yes. Paul?
I mean, Liz, in the first instance, I think it's shocking that we've got to a situation where, you know, we've had to change the way we think about this because of what happened at Grenfell. We should have been doing it long before. And, you know, it was an absolute disaster, terrible travesty. So many people's lives were lost. And then all of a sudden we start talking about, you know, how's the effects after Grenfell? Well, people were actually looking at this before, but maybe not in the right detail. I mean, it's happening now. I mean, contractors are coming on to us regularly. They don't want to take the risk in those buildings. They want to make sure that the specification that is there with the architect, whether it's a design and build or it's a traditional contract, is of solid foundation, and the product information is all there. Fire testing, CE marks, whether or not it's certified, IFC approvals, they are looking at it in so much detail, more than ever before. I think that this is going to, and it will, as Hannah says and Richard says, this is going to escalate a lot more over the next 12 and 18 months for sure.
Okay.
Do you think, Paul, that it's going to, sorry, I was just going to ask, like, is this going to fundamentally change the model of how we ironmongers sell into these contracts? Because I observe some contracts where you sort of have the different stakeholders and they're muscling against each other, and we get that very much with ironmongers coming in and different stakeholders that are trying to break the specification at every stage through. Do you think that we're going to actually see almost a move away from that model that we've been so used to in this industry?
Well,
are you talking
let's hear Steve's views. Sorry, I want to let Steve have a chance to give us his views.
I think I can probably answer that question. I think the first thing is, you know, we should never compromise on life safety in a building, and I think that's something that you know, unfortunately, the industry is more than aware of now. And I think there will be I agree with everything everybody else has said, but I think the one thing that will need to change is the way in which we specify maintenance routines and the way in which we maintain the products in a building. It's all well and good getting it spec'd right at the start, but if you don't maintain those products, if you don't service those products, then that's when you get a problem. So it's not just at the specification phase, but also lifecycle management.
So there's a question that comes to mind from this discussion, and it links perfectly with a question that Paul Campbell has also raised, which is this idea about responsible specification. And a thought that came to my mind listening to you talk was, I guess, with the most cynical hat on, the people who would say, well, this Grenfell stuff, it'll all go back to being about cost again. And Paul, you talked about this conversation being all about price rather than product. And I hear a lot of cynical views of like, well, it's all about cost. And Paul asked this question about when we've got all these buzzwords, things that are going to change the industry, but fundamentally what needs delivering is responsible specification. How do we improve that? How do we move away from this lowest cost to a highest value approach? Paul, specifically for you on that one, actually.
Okay, so let's take a little step back with that question. Who's driving the prices? We are. This industry's driving the prices. We're driving the prices because we're listening to what QSs, contractor teams are saying. Oh, you're too expensive. Well, what are you comparing it to? I'm sorry, but if you look at other trades within the construction industry, there's always going to be a high end, there's always going to be a low end, but we should not undersell ourselves. We need to actually say to our customers, you know what, I'm sorry, I'm going to walk away from that job because I don't want to be putting that product onto a building. Like Steve says, maintenance costs in the long term, we've got to look at life cycle costs of these buildings, how much that product costs at the forefront of the building when it goes out, and how much it's going to cost them to maintain over the next 20 years. I mean, if you're paying, I don't know, say £50 on a door handle that goes in at the start and has got a 20-year guarantee, that client's going to be spending, it's good saving for them, because in the long term, buying a £5 door handle that they're going to change every 12 months is ridiculous. Product failure rates are just so high. People don't talk up the test evidence when they're out there. They don't say about BSEN 1906 on a lever handle test that it's passed for vigorous, violent usage, category 4. It's never questioned because QSs never ask the question, Liz. They always just say, oh, your door handle's £5. Well, I'm sorry, the industry, the members need to say, tell your staff, talk up your product, talk about why it's got a BSEN 1906 test, and where that sits in the building life cycle costs.
Yeah.
Completely
Well,
agree.
you picked up on the other question from Errol Jones, who says, how can we ensure that we improve knowledge of life cycle management of a door set so that a door is as compliant on the first day of install right through to the last day of refurbishment? How can we ensure architectural ironmongers avoid being succumbed to contractor pressure for value engineering, that awful term, value engineering? Hannah, what would you say?
Even the term value engineering always makes me cringe because it's so often used incorrectly. It's, there's ripping the shreds out of a product, and then there's value engineering, and they're two completely different things. But look, I think we do need to resist this. And I think as well, if we look at the industry maybe previous to Grenfell, there maybe wasn't even the mechanisms where people could raise their concerns and have them listened to. So potentially that's more the route that we need to go down. So if we think something is wrong, number one, we stick to our morals. And I think one of my colleagues just said, turn around and walk away from jobs, which is, unfortunately, I expect everybody on this panel is thinking about a number of jobs in which they have walked away from, because do you know what? Number one, if I can rip that amount of cost out of product, number one, what it's saying is, well, your product at the beginning was probably overpriced anyway. But it's also meaning that I'm only interested in that short term, that bit when I want to sell the product. I'm not interested in the next 20 years. And that simply isn't where we come from. Just to kind of come back to the sustainability side of things, think about all the electrical products that we've got and the right to repair these products. Manufacturers have previously made it impossible for stakeholders to actually extend the life of these products by getting hold of replacement parts. This is a exactly the same in the door and the ironmongery industry. We need to be planning those maintenance schedules, as you say, Steve, right up front, because otherwise we're completely blinked in our decision making.
Steve, I'm going to ask you this question about, really resisting this pressure of value engineering, and again, taking this long-term view. How do we build up that collective confidence so that we can genuinely communicate and project the value of this sector and the work that you guys are doing? How do we change that culture forever over the next 10 years?
The hard part of that question is the behaviour we need to change is in people that don't always have our best interests at heart, and that's a general contractor. If you're a general contractor and you've got a 12-month defects liability period, that's not an incentive to specify product that's going to last the prescribed lifetime. So for me, we need to make sure that we connect with the architect or we connect with the end user, if possible, whichever way, and make sure that they're aware of the full cost of the life cycle of our solutions and the benefits of our solutions. We need to do that work upstream, and we need strength through enforcement, whether that's through the architect or others, to make sure that specification isn't changed. There will be when we come out of this pandemic, a little bit probably too much strength in the general contractor's hands, because there'll be less projects and more opportunity for them to value engineer. But I think the work needs to be done upstream, and we somehow need to bring to life the ability to keep costs low through lifecycle management, a better lifecycle management of quality products. And it's not the cost actually is irrelevant, because you can find a different price for a different product wherever you choose to go. What is most important is its durability. Does it stand up to the specification? And if you want 7 years trouble-free operation in a product, then and we guarantee that, we need to make sure that that's maintained by the architect, for example. But the key thing for me is changing behaviour of the contractor.
Yes, but you talk about the vital importance then of the relationship with the architect and ultimately potentially the end user, the client, the people using that building. Richard, as an architect, what does this sector need to do differently over the next 10 years to genuinely engage you in those conversations, to ensure that you're also on side and are going to be fighting the corner for maintaining that specification?
I think the members of the panel have already given you all the answers. I said right at the start, the 3 C's of specification: compliance, cost, and carbon. So let's start with compliance. The product has to do what it's supposed to do. If the specification for a particular piece of ironmongery is was that BS 1906? I didn't get the reference, but to a particular British standard that has a particular performance requirement, get that in the specification. As we move on through the next few years, and we recognise that ironmongery systems are part of building safety, that data has to be collected. It's got to go into the building safety file, so we'll know whether these products work or not. And there is legislative and criminal action behind that for people who do not do it properly. That's part of the new building safety bill. If you do not document properly, if you do not put the right products in, if you are the person, Mr. Main Contractor, that has chosen that substandard product over and above what was in the specification, you've got to explain why, because you will be at the heart of the next process, the legal process, if that building fails. So in all of this, I would say target the architect, because architects love to talk about life cycle costing now. They're really focused on sustainability and material reuse, circular economy, and then get up to the client. Make it so it's the client's requirement. And that means the FM teams, and saying, look, this is going to make your job simpler, because you're only going to need to maintain these pieces of ironmongery every 7 years and not every 1 year.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Paul, I'm going to actually change the conversation slightly because we've had a question put in, which I think is an interesting one and provocative one. Changes the topic slightly, but also builds on this idea of accountability and responsibility. And the question is, do the panel think that AI should be licensed or registered in the same way that architects are? Architects, obviously, with the Architects Registration Board, are licensed, and there is the protection of that title. Do you think that that should happen in this sector? And if so, what criteria would be used? So actually, let's go to you, Richard, first, as a registered or chartered architect.
Yeah, do you know what? Even yes. So back to the kind of the factual bit. There is the Architects Act, which means only people who are qualified can call themselves an architect. Fantastic. Yes. Protection of title, not protection of function. Anybody can design a building. So actually, the protection of title is meaningless. Absolutely meaningless. It's the function that's absolutely critical. So does it work? Depends on what you're going to protect.
Well, I know this is a big discussion at the moment in the architectural world around whether protection of function may well come in as a result almost of the changes to building safety legislation. But
and I think what's also coming up, of course, is competencies. So
yes.
And within particular functions, whether you are competent to carry out that function. And I think that is where we might see some changes coming.
So Paul, as an architectural ironmonger, GAI, would you welcome the chance to be licensed and registered in that way?
I mean, would you put a unregistered corgi gas fitter into your house to change your boiler over? No, you wouldn't. And I think when architects are looking at sort of producing ironmongery specifications, they need to turn to the GAI, the Reg AI that we've had out there. I actually feel, and members of the guild may be sitting out there today thinking, oh yeah, well the Reg AI doesn't really stand for much, and they're right, because I don't think it has the worth that it should have today. I think if we're going to take this forward, let's get that work out into the mindset. We've talked about it for so many years. I spent 4 years doing my studies. It surely should serve a purpose when we're going out and talking about specifications, because registered architectural ironmongers are fully up to date. They're fully trained. They've got all the information that's coming through from the guild, all about standards, all about, the hacking inquiry, etc. They need to be the ones that are talking to the architects. Because I actually think, listen to Richard there, the architect's power is actually coming back. Design and build contracts where they lost all the power, they got novated over to the contractor. They're now actually getting pushed onto client side. They've got the client's ear. They're telling the client, don't even entertain that, throw that one in the bin. And the architect's power is actually slowly but surely coming back. So I think specifications are definitely on the rise in our industry, and for the better as well.
Steve, what would you say? Can you see this in a few years' time, or will it be 10 years? I don't know.
Yeah,
how long will it take?
Yeah, I'd like to see it, and to build on the answers that were given there, I think there's an awful lot of effort goes into achieving that status, and I think there must be a value to that. And I also believe if the industry, talking about the impact of something like Grenfell, there will be more concentration on professionalism and competency when it comes to building design and also the components of building design. So it is an opportunity for us to professionalize even further our industry. It adds more value, I think, to it. And I think the direction of travel is that it could and it should happen for us.
Yeah. Yes, the focus on competencies is absolutely critical, and I think within the guild, actually, guild members are extraordinarily lucky because you have a technical manager who's right at the forefront of this, and Working Group 12 and all the activities that are happening to identify the competencies for the future. So I think for guild members, you should certainly get a very clear, advanced understanding of the direction of travel around competencies. And it may be then that sort of registration or licensing of some sort follows shortly afterwards. I don't know. Hannah, do you have a view on this one particularly?
I think there are probably people who are much more expert on the panel who would answer for me, but overall, I would just kind of reiterate this point about competency. I think maybe we need to think about not even standing still. Like with what I know about the GAI education program, it is something which is unique. It's something which is brilliant. We need to tell more people about it, but we need to also kind of adopt really this mentality of continuous improvement and not the complacency to think that we're there. Ultimately, our landscape is moving so much at the moment that ultimately the way that we deliver competencies and we measure competencies and we go back and we retrain and all of these kind of things probably needs consideration to make sure that the way in which we do it is the best way, or do we need to adopt new ways as was some of our earlier conversation about how we actually go and deliver these education resources. So I'll leave it there, Liz. Thank you.
No, that's good. Thank you. We have got many more questions, but we're also quite short on time. So I'm sure we'll find a way of addressing all of the questions, possibly after the event. There'll be other opportunities to come back to you all. But I wanted, if I may, in the time we've got left, a really quick round to ask everybody. I'm going to go back to the sustainability issue and the sustainability question. That is an agenda that is not going away anytime soon. In fact, I think it will colour all of our lifespans and our children's too. So I'm curious to know from each of you, where do we start that journey? If we haven't actually, we're starting to become more aware and more conscious of the issues. What advice would you give either to a business in the architecture or ironmongery sector, or even an individual? Where do you start that journey in your work towards contributing towards a lower carbon future? Yes, Hannah.
Well, just really quickly, number one, get educated. So get informed, and then you can make informed decisions. So once you're educated, make a plan, and make that plan quite quickly, Liz. I mean, really, if I look at my entire professional career, this is over a couple of decades now, sustainability has always been there, but you're absolutely right. Like I'm feeling the ramp up. I'm feeling the ramp up of awareness. So this is going to come really quickly. So for those businesses that I'm afraid haven't been thinking about this or have, maybe been a bit blinkered to it, I'd say, you need to quickly get educated and then get a plan in place, looking at your products, your manufacturing processes, your whole entire supply chain from cradle to grave. Understand it, and then you can make informed decisions about ultimately how you're going to work to improve it. So that would be my bit of advice on it.
Yes. And Paul, you've been on this, Joel, you are on this journey, very much so. So where did you start and what advice would you give?
Yeah, well, we've been on this journey now for a number of years. I mean, if I took sustainability, product guarantee of 20 years is certainly more sustainable than something that's going out there for 1 year. But, Hannah said then about cradle to grave or life cycle assessment, or the LCA. I mean, it's a methodology used to evaluate natural effects linked to all phases in the life of the product, from obtaining the raw materials, the steel that you buy, the processes of these materials, manufacturing, the dissemination of them, uses, maintenance, repair, or selling or reuse, recycling them. How much of that steel is recyclable, as an example? I mean, we had an inquiry come through from a lovely practice the other week, and we had to fill in a questionnaire. Cradle to grave was one we had to look at. BREEAM was another one. LEED was another one. Your guarantees, how much of your material is recyclable. This is the start. These practices are looking at manufacturers, like D-Line, a manufacturer, and others around the world to say, what are you doing as a business to make these changes? And if we don't, as Hannah says, jump into it now, we're going to be left way behind. But one of the small changes that we can make, let's start looking indoors at your building. We don't post quotes anymore to architects. We're PDFing them, ping them over electronically, to all our customers, contractors as well. Let's look at our packaging. Let's look at our plastic consumption within our packaging. Surely we can look at compostable bags which are out there rather than standard plastics. Let's look at the cardboard that we're using. Is it recyclable? Maybe arrange, as an example, for your team to go to a site to pick up the rubbish to recycle it for your contractor. Small changes, if you make that impact now, will make a huge difference in the future for everybody.
Lots of tips there. Richard and then Steve.
Difficult to say any more than what Paul said there, and I love to hear what he's just said. Got to say, for me, it would be to remember that because we're talking about over the next 10 years, we like to see systems where the data, anybody making a choice on that can look at the data and see what is the life cycle carbon of that product over a given period. So if it's got a life cycle of 20 years and I've got a design life cycle of 60, I need to multiply that by 3. Or if I know this handle is going to fail in 2 years, I need to multiply it by 30. But it's actually having what is the embodied carbon, what is the embodied water, i.e. the cost of carbon to make the product and transport it, the cost of water, because embodied water is going to become just as important as embodied carbon. So that comes back to the data. But then everything Paul said as well, just loved it. Thank you.
Steve, final word on this one.
Oh yeah, I just would say don't overthink it. You know, you can look at what a big corporate does and you can look what it does as an individual. Just take small steps, be aware of what you can do, and measure your progress if you can. You know, if everybody takes a small step, it makes much more impact than if we wait for a corporation to change one element of what it does. It's accountability, personal accountability.
What can the Guild do for the journey?
I think exactly what people have been talking about here today, which is from a product perspective, it's the life cycle management element of it. It's the durability. We need to make sure that if that is what people want in the marketplace, and I believe what it is now, it's a big driver, that we explicitly mention the sustainability, the environmental impact of the services and solutions that we prescribe, and then we as much as we can make sure they get carried through in specifications, and probably in the education process we need to enhance that part when it comes to what's the value proposition for something that's environmentally more sustainable against another product or solution. So maybe that's somewhere we need to adapt, but to me it's just really continuing to do what we do, but drawing out those benefits.
Hannah, did you want to come in quickly?
Just a very quick one, Liz, but just to kind of, again, sort of along our theme of thinking of products, or these products as within their systems, like equally when we think about sustainability of an element of ironmongery, we should also think about how that contributes to the overall sustainability values of the building that it's actually in. And I know that obviously, Paul, this is another really big discussion that we could have together, and I think that we should, but like, let's not think about these things in isolation, because ultimately the impact that our products, positive and negative, could then have in the end space that they are installed in, there are also sustainability benefits to be picked up there. So actually maybe in some of the communications that the Guild does, it's actually about like why explaining the value of the sustainability work that the members do and how that actually in a positive way helps our external stakeholders. Paul, I think you were just going to come in and with a comment there.
I was going to add one final thing there, what you said, because when you look at, say, sustainable environments, buildings that which will have BREEAM excellence, for example, which Richard knows more about, it's also about having the well-being as well for the people that are working within those environments. And let's not forget, we've gone for the last 12 months where mental health has been at its all-time high. And so let's also remember people coming back repositioned into buildings. Let's repurpose buildings. Let's not just knock them down, because that isn't sustainable, knocking them down, building a new one. Let's repurpose these buildings and make them BREEAM excellence with the products that we can all supply. I know all our members can do this.
I couldn't agree more. There's some really brilliant campaigns going at the moment. The Architects Journal has a campaign called Retrofit First, I think it's called, and there's all sorts of other campaigns going. There's a big push for a national refurbishment strategy here in the UK. I know it's going to become an international issue as well. So I think these are big trends for the future.
Well, it's known as the 99%, because in order to be able to hit our national carbon targets, we only change 1% of our built stock a year. So in order to hit the carbon targets, we have to do something with the other 99%. That's the retrofit strategy.
Love it. Thank you. Do you know what? We could discuss these and other topics all day. We've had some really interesting comments as well come through. As I say, we're going to try and respond to them after today's event. But can I just say a huge thank you to all the panelists, and again to Masonite as sponsor of this event. These things don't just happen by magic. So thank you very much indeed for your support. Do drop into their product showcase session later on in the day. Thank you to all the panelists. You've been absolutely fantastic and given us a lot of food for thought. I have to do some housekeeping now because we're about to come up for a 15-minute break, which has been sponsored by Lorient, another very kind sponsor. Thank you. So this 15-minute break, a chance for you to grab a coffee if you need to, but also actually there's some really important things that you can also do in this time. Don't leave us completely. So you will see on your screen on the left-hand side, there's an area called Sponsor Expo. That's a chance to come and get to know some of those brands and see what they've got on offer on their stands in that area. There's also a people section, which is sort of a bit like LinkedIn in that you can connect with people, other delegates from all over the world who have joined us today. So please take the moment to explore the people section. I think you can build a profile of your personal details on there and others can connect to you too. When we come back, and the time in UK time will be 1:45 British Summer Time is the time for the next session. It's now 1:28, so it's not long to go. 1:45, we're going to be having the AGM for the Guild, a very important event with some very important issues to be discussed. So please come back to us for that. If you are a Guild member company, you obviously have a right to vote at that AGM, and those of you who are the nominated representative of a member company with voting rights, you'll know who you are, I'm sure. It's obviously not everyone on this event, but there's a group of you who have nominated voting rights. You would have received an email on the 19th of May with information on what's called Slido, the Slido voting system. I hope you'll be able to find that information. You've got a chance to go and play with it. There's a sort of a sample a vote on there already, so you can test it out. But please go and get yourselves ready, and we look forward to seeing you all back here for UK 1:45, but about 15 minutes time, please, to join the AGM. But thank you all. Thank you very much for joining us today, and I'll see you later.
Thank you. Great days, everyone. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.